Manuel Garza. In February 2001, Officer John Rocky Riojas, a 37-year-old SWAT team member, attempted to arrest Manuel Garza, a parole violator. During the confrontation, Garza wrestled Rocky's gun away and fatally shot him in the head. Garza then fled the scene, discarding the officer's weapon. He was apprehended the following day at his sister's apartment after an informant reported someone attempting to sell the stolen firearm. Garza was convicted of capital murder in 2002 and sentenced to death. Despite multiple appeals, his conviction was upheld. On April 15, 2015, at the age of 34, Garza entered the execution chamber at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He refused a special last meal. He said nothing, just silence. They laid him on a long table, like a metal bed. Thick leather straps were pulled tight across his arms, chest, and legs so he couldn't move. In the next room, behind a glass window, the witnesses watched, some holding back tears, others just waiting. A pair of tubes were connected to his arms, and through those tubes, the process began. First, a strong drug flowed into his veins like a wave of sleep rushing over his body. His eyes started to flutter, his breathing slowed. Then came another drug that made sure he wouldn't move or react, freezing him in place like a statue. The final drug stopped his heart, quietly and powerfully. Within minutes, his chest stopped rising. At 6:49 p.m., Manuel Garza Jr. was pronounced dead. Donald Keith Newberry. Donald Keith Newberry was convicted for his role in the murder of a police officer during a daring prison escape. In December 2000, Newberry and 6 other inmates broke out of the Connolly unit in South Texas. They were known as the Texas Seven, a group of violent criminals who overpowered guards, stole weapons, and went on the run. On Christmas Eve, just days after escaping, the group robbed a sporting goods store in Irving, Texas. As they fled, they encountered Officer Aubrey Hawkins, a young police officer responding to the alarm. Newberry and the others ambushed him, shooting him 11 times. They ran over his body as they sped away. Officer Hawkins died at the scene. After 6 weeks on the run, Newberry and the rest of the gang were captured in Colorado. One member took his own life. The others, including Newberry, were extradited back to Texas to face justice. In 2002, Newberry was sentenced to death for his role in the killing. After 13 years on death row, Donald Newberry was led into the execution chamber. In his final hours, he declined all visits and refused a special last meal. As he laid flat on the gurney, his arms were stretched out. Leather straps pinned him down at the wrists, chest, and ankles. A needle slid into his arm, thin, sharp, and connected to the system that would soon end his life. On the other side of the glass, witnesses stood silently, watching. His final words were, "I've hurt a lot of people. I've destroyed lives. I take full responsibility for what I've done. I am sorry for what I did to Officer Hawkins and his family." Then, the first drug flowed in, a powerful sedative, meant to silence the mind. Within seconds, his eyes shut close, his muscles softened, and his breathing slowed. Next came the paralytic, locking his lungs, freezing every part of him in place. It was like his body turned to stone. Finally, the last chemical hit his heart, finally shutting it down. At 6:25 p.m., Donald Keith Newberry was pronounced dead, one of the most notorious fugitives in modern Texas history, brought to justice. Lester Leroy Bauer, Jr. In October 1983, 4 men were found shot execution-style inside an aircraft hangar in Grayson County, Texas. The brutal slayings terrified the quiet community. For months, there were no arrests, until investigators discovered stolen aircraft parts in Bauer's home. He insisted they were bought legally. He denied everything. Still, the circumstantial evidence stacked up. In 1984, Bauer was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. For the next 31 years, Bauer maintained his innocence, making him one of the longest-serving death row inmates in American history. His lawyers argued that key evidence had been withheld and that alternative suspects were never fully investigated. But the courts were unmoved. On June 3, 2015, Lester Bauer was led into the execution chamber at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He was 67 years old. He declined a final meal. And with his last breath, he stood by his claims. "I have fought the good fight. I held my faith. I am not going to say goodbye. I will simply say, until we meet again." They guided him to the table. He laid down calmly. His arms were stretched out and strapped down. 2 clear tubes were attached to his arms, snaking off to the side, connected to 3 syringes. The first drug made him feel sleepy, like drifting off under heavy blankets. The second kept him from moving, even if his body wanted to. And the third was the one that stopped everything. It took just a few minutes. At 6:36 p.m., Lester Leroy Bauer Jr. was pronounced dead, leaving behind unanswered questions and a case that still stirs doubt to this day. David Zink. In July 2001, 19-year-old Amanda Morton was driving near Strafford, Missouri, when her car was rear-ended by David Zink. What seemed like a simple roadside accident quickly turned into a nightmare. Zink pretended to help, but instead kidnapped Amanda, taking her to a motel and later to his home. Over the course of several hours, he bound, sexually assaulted, and tortured her. Then he drove her to a cemetery, tied her to a tree, and strangled her to death. He buried her body nearby. Zink, a convicted sex offender on parole, confessed to the murder shortly after his arrest. He claimed he feared going back to prison and decided to silence Amanda forever. In 2004, a jury sentenced him to death. Over the next decade, Zink appealed his case, citing childhood abuse and mental health issues. But the courts denied his requests. Justice would not be delayed. David Zink was escorted into the death chamber. His last meal included a cheeseburger, fries, cheesecake, and a soft drink. When it was time, Zink was strapped onto the gurney. Wide leather belts tightened across his arms, chest, and legs. As the needle slid into his arm, the sedative entered first, a flood of chemicals slowing everything down. His breathing softened, his muscles grew heavy. His eyelids fluttered like a man slipping into a deep sleep. Then, the second drug took over, freezing him in place. No more movement, no more sound, just the rise and fall of his chest, until that stopped too. Finally, the third drug struck his heart like a silent hammer. And just like that, everything inside him shut down. At 7:41 p.m., David Zink was pronounced dead. His final words were chilling. "We have a much easier death than most. Let's celebrate our true liberation."